The sound of a breaking plate is loud, but the sound of a child's heart breaking is completely silent. It was a Sunday afternoon, precisely 2:15 p.m. The house smelled like roasted garlic and my mother's expensive vanilla perfume. That was the exact moment my mother, a woman who had spent my entire life weaponizing her affection, looked my 9-year-old daughter dead in the eye and erased her from our family. To understand how we got to that moment, you need to understand the dynamic of my family. My name is Sarah. I am 32, and for as long as I can remember, I have been the designated shock absorber for my mother, Helen. My mother is a woman who thrives on control and theatrical martyrdom. Then there is my younger sister, Emma. Emma is 28, and she is the golden child. Emma has never done a load of laundry she didn't complain about, and she has never held a job for more than a year. But in my mother's eyes, Emma is fragile, precious, and always in need of rescuing. When my daughter, Maya, was born, I naively thought things would change. I thought becoming a grandmother would soften Helen. And it did, until Emma had her son, Leo, 2 years later. From the moment Leo was born, the favoritism wasn't just obvious, it was aggressive. At Christmas, Leo would get a towering stack of expensive toys, while Maya would receive a generic gift card or clothes 2 sizes too big. When I brought it up, my mother would wave her hand dismissively and say, "Oh, Sarah, stop being so dramatic. Emma is a single mother. Leo needs more support. Maya has you and a stable home." I swallowed the disrespect for years because I wanted my daughter to have a grandmother. I thought a flawed extended family was better than none at all. That was the biggest mistake of my life. The breaking point happened at my mother's house during our monthly Sunday dinner. Maya, who is a quiet, sweet, and incredibly perceptive 9-year-old, was sitting on the living room rug, carefully building a Lego set she had brought from home. It was a complex architectural set she had saved up her own allowance to buy. Leo, who is 7 and has never been told the word no in his entire life, ran into the room. He didn't ask to play, he just kicked the Lego structure. Pieces shattered across the hardwood floor. Maya gasped, her eyes welling up with tears, but she didn't yell. She just started scrambling to pick up the pieces, her little hands shaking. "Leo, please don't do that," she said softly. Leo laughed and stomped on a loose brick. That was when I walked into the room from the kitchen. "Leo, stop," I said firmly. I knelt down to help Maya. "You don't break other people's things." Right on cue, Emma swooped in, clutching her pearls. "Sarah, don't yell at my son. He's just a little boy playing." Before I could even respond, my mother marched into the living room, wiping her hands on a dish towel. She didn't look at the broken Legos. She didn't look at Leo. She looked directly at Maya, who was now quietly crying, holding a broken plastic window. "Oh, for heaven's sake," my mother snapped, her voice dripping with venom. "Stop whining, Maya. You are always causing drama in this house. If you can't share your little toys with your cousin, then you shouldn't be here." Maya looked up, her lower lip trembling. "But Grandma, it was mine. I bought it and he broke it." My mother's eyes narrowed. She took a step closer to my 9-year-old daughter and delivered the line that would permanently alter the course of our lives. "I don't care," my mother said, her voice dropping to a cold, cruel whisper. "Leo is Emma's boy, and he belongs here. Honestly, with the way you behave, you aren't even real family anymore. Now go sit in the corner and stop ruining our Sunday." The room went dead silent. Emma smirked, crossing her arms. Leo giggled. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. A strange, heavy numbness washed over me, starting from my chest and spreading to my fingertips. In that split second, the veil lifted. I didn't see my mother anymore. I saw a bully who was actively destroying my daughter's self-worth to elevate her golden child. I stood up. I took Maya by her small hand. "Leave the Legos, sweetie," I said softly, my voice perfectly steady. We are leaving. Oh, don't be so dramatic, Sarah, my mother scoffed, rolling her eyes. Where are you going? Dinner is almost ready. I didn't look at her. I didn't say a single word. I walked to the hallway, grabbed Maya's coat, and walked out the front door. My mother yelled something from the porch about me being overly sensitive, but I didn't turn around. When we got to the car, I buckled Maya in. She looked at me, her big brown eyes filled with confusion and hurt. Mommy, why did Grandma say I'm not family? I felt my heart physically ache, but I kept my face strong. I kissed her forehead. Because Grandma is broken, Maya, and we don't let broken people tell us who we are. I am your family. Your dad is your family, and we are never, ever going back to that house. That night, I blocked my mother's number. I blocked Emma's number. I blocked them on all social media. I didn't write a dramatic farewell text. I simply evaporated from their lives. For 3 weeks, there was total, beautiful silence. Maya started smiling more. We spent our weekends going to museums and baking cookies, entirely free from the anxiety of Helen's toxic judgment. I thought it was over. I thought the trash had finally taken itself out. But narcissists never truly let you go, especially when they run out of money. Exactly 21 days after my mother told my daughter she wasn't family, my doorbell rang at 8 p.m. on a Tuesday. I checked the security camera. It was my mother, and she was crying. I watched my mother through the grainy lens of the security camera for a full 2 minutes. Helen, a woman who usually never left her house without perfectly styled hair and a full face of makeup, looked frantic. Her expensive beige trench coat was thrown on unevenly, and her mascara was smudged under her eyes. She pressed the doorbell again, her finger lingering on the button in a desperate, continuous ring. I did not panic. I simply felt a cold, hard knot of resolve tighten in my chest. I unlocked the front door and stepped out onto the porch, immediately pulling the heavy oak door shut behind me until it clicked and locked. Maya was asleep upstairs in her bedroom, and I was not going to let a single ounce of Helen's chaos breach the walls of my home. Sarah, thank God, my mother gasped, rushing up the porch steps. She reached out to grab my arms, but I took a deliberate step back, keeping my hands inside the pockets of my cardigan. Her hands fell to her sides. She looked taken aback, but the desperation quickly overrode her pride. Sarah, we are in trouble, she stammered, her voice shaking. Emma is in the car. We need to stay here, just for a little while, just until we figure things out. I looked past her toward the street. Parked under the dim glow of the streetlight was Emma's luxury SUV. The engine was running. I could see my sister sitting in the driver's seat, staring straight ahead, while Leo was bouncing around in the back. The back of the car was packed to the roof with garbage bags and suitcases. What do you mean you need to stay here? I asked, my voice perfectly level. I didn't ask what happened. I didn't ask if they were okay. I simply addressed the logistics. My mother burst into tears, but these weren't the theatrical, manipulative tears I had grown up with. This was genuine, raw panic.
Emma, she made a mistake, Sarah.
Helen choked out.
She got involved with some bad people. Private lenders. She took out loans to fund that new boutique business of hers, and she forged my signature as the guarantor. They froze my bank accounts yesterday morning. The bank is foreclosing on the house. They gave us 24 hours to vacate before the locks were changed.
I stared at her. The silence on the porch was deafening, broken only by the distant hum of Emma's car engine. For 28 years, Helen had funded Emma's delusions of grandeur. She had bailed her out of credit card debt, paid her rent, and constantly covered up her financial incompetence, always claiming Emma just needed a little help to get on her feet. Now, the golden child hadn't just stumbled, she had detonated a financial bomb that took them both down. You let her forge your signature? I asked flatly.
I didn't know.
Helen wailed. She had access to my home office. Sarah, I have $20 in my purse. Emma's credit is destroyed. We have absolutely nowhere to go. You have the guest room, and Leo can sleep on the sofa. We just need a roof over our heads while I get a lawyer to sort this out. She looked at me with wide, pleading eyes, fully expecting the old Sarah to emerge, the Sarah who always fixed the messes, the Sarah who craved her mother's approval so much that she would set herself on fire just to keep the family warm. I looked at the woman who had birthed me. I looked at the smudged makeup and the trembling hands. And then I thought about my 9-year-old daughter. I thought about Maya kneeling on the floor, holding a broken Lego window, crying while her grandmother verbally erased her existence. No, I said quietly. Helen blinked, as if I had spoken to her in a foreign language. What? Sarah, did you hear me? We are homeless. I heard you perfectly, I replied, keeping my posture completely relaxed. But you cannot stay here. Emma cannot stay here. And Leo cannot stay here. My mother's shock instantly morphed into the vicious, defensive anger I knew so well. Her tears stopped, and her eyes hardened. "Are you out of your mind?" she hissed, taking a step toward me. "I am your mother. Your sister is sitting in that car with a 7-year-old boy who has nowhere to sleep tonight. You are going to hold a petty grudge over a plastic toy when your family is on the streets?" "It was never about the toy, Helen," I said, my voice dropping to a dangerously quiet octave. "It was about the truth. 3 weeks ago, you looked at my crime child and told her she was not family. You told her she didn't belong with you because Leo was your real family." "I was stressed," she yelled, waving her hands frantically. "Emma was going through the audit and I snapped. It was just words, Sarah." "And these are just words," I replied. "But unlike yours, mine are final. You made your choice 3 weeks ago. You chose your golden child, and you chose to discard us. So go be a family with Emma. My home is a sanctuary for the people who actually belong in it, and you don't." Helen stared at me, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. She had never, not once in my entire 32 years of life, heard me speak to her with such absolute, unwavering authority. She realized, in that freezing moment on my porch, that she had completely lost control of her backup plan. "If you don't open this door," Helen threatened, her voice shaking with rage, "I will make sure everyone in our extended family knows exactly what kind of heartless, cruel daughter you are. I will ruin your reputation." I smiled. It was a small, cold smile. "Helen, you don't have a house, you don't have a bank account, and your favorite daughter just committed felony fraud," I whispered. "I really don't think you are in a position to ruin anyone's reputation right now." I turned around, slid my key into the lock, and opened my front door. "Wait, Sarah, please!" she screamed, lunging for the door handle. I stepped inside and shut the heavy oak door directly in her face. I engaged the deadbolt, latched the chain, and turned off the porch light, plunging her into darkness. I stood in my quiet hallway for a moment, listening to the muffled sound of my mother sobbing against the wood. Then I walked upstairs, checked on Maya, who was sleeping peacefully under her warm duvet, and went to bed. But I knew the reality of dealing with toxic people. They don't just walk away when you close the door. They escalate. The next morning, the real war began. And that was when I realized I wasn't just going to have to defend my boundaries, I was going to have to financially bury my sister to protect my daughter. The morning after I left my mother crying on my porch, I woke up at 6 a.m., made a pot of coffee, and packed Maya's lunchbox. The house was quiet and safe. I watched the sunrise from my kitchen window, feeling an overwhelming sense of peace. I actually believed the worst was over. I didn't realize that toxic people don't just drown quietly. They try to pull everyone else under the water with them. At 9:30 a.m., after I had dropped Maya off at school and settled into my home office for work, a heavy, aggressive pounding rattled my front door. It wasn't the frantic ringing of my mother. This was the knock of someone who was used to kicking doors in. I walked to the hallway and checked the camera. 2 large men in dark, cheap suits were standing on my porch. One of them held a thick manila folder. They didn't look like police officers. They looked like the kind of men who broke kneecaps for a living. I engaged the security chain on the door before opening it a few inches. "Can I help you?" I asked, keeping my tone perfectly neutral. The taller man looked down at a piece of paper, then back up at me.
"Are you Sarah Mitchell?"
"I am."
"We're looking for Emma Mitchell, or Helen Mitchell. This address is listed as Emma's primary residence on a defaulted promissory note. We need to speak with her immediately regarding a sum of $65,000.
The number hit me like a physical blow. $65,000. My mother had downplayed it. Emma hadn't just taken out a small loan. She had borrowed a small fortune from predatory lenders, and she had used my home address to legitimize her fraudulent application. "Emma does not live here," I said coldly. "She has never lived here. Neither does Helen." The man sneered, placing a heavy boot against the bottom of my door.
"Look, lady, we know how this works. People lie. The paperwork says this is her permanent address. That makes this property a point of interest for asset recovery. So, unless you want us coming back here every day, you need to tell us where she is."
My heart rate spiked, but my face remained entirely blank. Emma had brought dangerous men to the doorstep where my 9-year-old daughter slept. "Remove your foot from my door," I said, my voice dropping to a whisper so sharp it cut through the morning air. He didn't move. "I am going to say this exactly once," I continued, making direct, unblinking eye contact with him. "My sister committed wire fraud and forgery. She gave you this address illegally. Above your head is a high-definition security camera currently recording your face, your voice, and your foot on my property. In exactly 10 seconds, I am calling the police to report 2 men attempting a home invasion. And after that, I am calling my lawyer to file a harassment suit against whatever predatory lending company you work for." The man stared at me for a long, tense moment. He was used to people panicking, crying, or lying. He was not used to a woman quoting legal retaliation with dead eyes. Slowly, he pulled his foot back. He shoved a business card through the crack in the door.
"If you see her, tell her time is up."
They turned and walked back to a black sedan parked across the street. I shut the door, locked the deadbolt, and immediately picked up my phone. I didn't call my mother. I called the local police precinct. I requested an officer to come to my house to file an official report for trespassing and harassment, explicitly naming my sister, Emma Mitchell, as the instigator of the fraud. While I was waiting for the police to arrive, my cell phone rang. It was an unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. 2 minutes later, the voicemail notification popped up. I put it on speakerphone. It was Helen. Her voice was raspy, echoing slightly like she was calling from a public bathroom. "Sarah, pick up the phone. We are at the Motel 6 off the interstate. My credit cards are entirely blocked. Emma's car was repossessed this morning right out of the motel parking lot. They just came with a tow truck and took it. Leo is terrified. I know you're angry, but you have to send us money. Just wire $2,000 so we can get a rental car and some food. You can't leave your family to starve. I will pay you back, I swear." I listened to the message twice. She still didn't get it. She still thought this was a temporary fight. She still thought I was the safety net. I saved the voicemail. Then I opened my laptop and logged into the state's public court records database. I wanted to see exactly how deep this hole was. It took me less than 10 minutes to find the filings. Emma hadn't just forged our mother's signature on a loan.
Over the past 3 years, Emma had opened 4 different credit cards in Helen's name, maxing out every single one of them to fund her boutique lifestyle. Helen had to have known. My mother had likely been covering the minimum payments to protect Emma's reputation, draining her own savings until she had nothing left to give, forcing Emma to turn to illegal private lenders. Helen wasn't just a victim, she was an accomplice to her own ruin, and now they wanted my money to keep the charade going.
The police officer arrived 20 minutes later. I handed him the business card the debt collector had left, the video footage from my porch camera, and a printed copy of the court filings showing my sister's history of financial fraud. "I want a restraining order," I told the officer, sitting at my kitchen table. "Against my sister, Emma Mitchell, and my mother, Helen Mitchell. They are committing severe financial fraud, and they are attempting to direct dangerous debt collectors to my home, where my minor child lives." The officer looked at the stack of evidence. "You know a restraining order will mean they could face arrest if they come within 500 feet of you or your daughter?" "I am counting on it," I said. That afternoon, I picked Maya up from school. We stopped for ice cream. We laughed, and we talked about her day. I didn't let a single ounce of the morning's darkness touch her. But at 7 p.m., my phone rang again. It was the same unknown number. This time, I answered it. "I need $2,000, Sarah," Helen demanded immediately, not even bothering to say hello. "Are you going to send it, or are you going to let your nephew sleep on a motel floor?" "I'm not sending you a dime, Helen," I said calmly, "but I did send something else to the motel. They should be arriving right about now." "What? What did you send?" she asked, her voice taking up in panic. Through the phone, I heard the faint, unmistakable sound of sirens pulling into the motel parking lot.
What did you do, Sarah?
Helen's voice cracked over the phone. The sound of the approaching sirens was growing deafening in the background. Through the receiver, I could hear the heavy crunch of gravel as multiple police cruisers pulled into the motel parking lot, their red and blue lights likely painting the cheap motel room walls. "I protected my family, Helen," I said, my voice as calm as a frozen lake. "I gave the police the dashcam footage of the debt collectors Emma sent to my house. I gave them the public records of the wire fraud Emma committed using your name. And because she is currently fleeing predatory loan sharks while dragging a 7-year-old boy from motel to motel, I also called Child Protective Services to request an emergency wellness check on Leo." There was a moment of absolute, horrifying silence on the other end of the line. The reality of her golden child's collapse had finally breached the walls of her delusion.
You called CPS on your own sister?
Helen whispered, sounding like she was choking on the words.
"They'll take him away. They'll arrest her, Sarah. How could you do this?"
"I didn't do this, Helen," I replied softly. "Emma forged documents. You covered it up. You both brought dangerous men to the doorstep where my 9-year-old sleeps. I am simply holding a mirror up to the choices you made. I told you I wasn't your safety net anymore." Through the phone, I heard a loud, authoritative knock on a motel room door. A deep voice shouted, "Police department, open the door!" "Sarah, please, you have to tell them it's a mistake," Helen screamed, panic completely shattering her voice. "Tell them you'll pay the loan. Tell them—" "Goodbye, Helen," I said. I pressed the red button, ending the call. Then I went into my phone's settings and permanently blocked the number. I walked into the living room, sat on my comfortable sofa, and picked up a book. I didn't feel guilty. I didn't feel sad. I didn't even feel the urge to turn on the news. For the first time in 32 years, the heavy, suffocating weight of my mother's expectations was completely gone. I breathed in the quiet air of my safe, secure home, and I listened to the absolute silence of a battle I had finally won. But I knew the legal system. The arrest was only the explosion. The real damage would be in the shockwave that followed the next morning. The morning after Emma's arrest, the silence in my house was broken at exactly 9 a.m. It was my lawyer, Patricia. She was a sharp, no-nonsense woman who billed by the minute and never called with good news. "Sarah, I just got off the phone with the precinct," Patricia said, her voice crisp and urgent. "Emma is being held on a $100,000 bail. Because of the outstanding warrants connected to the predatory lenders across state lines, she is considered a massive flight risk. Helen is currently sitting in the waiting area of the police station, demanding to speak to the chief of police. She actually threatened to sue the department for emotional distress." I took a slow sip of my coffee, looking out the kitchen window. Let her threaten them. She doesn't have the money for a parking ticket, let alone a civil lawsuit. "Exactly," Patricia replied. "But here is why I am calling. The state prosecutors are building a massive fraud case against Emma. The amount she defaulted on isn't just the $65,000 from the private lenders. They pulled her full credit history overnight. Over the last 4 years, Emma has opened 11 different lines of credit, 4 in Helen's name, 2 in her ex-husband's name before their divorce was finalized, and 1 under Helen's deceased sister's social security number." I stopped breathing for a fraction of a second. My Aunt Clara had died of breast cancer 5 years ago. My mother had wept at the funeral, claiming she was devastated, and all the while, Emma had been using Clara's ghost to fund her boutique shopping addiction. "Helen knew," I said, the realization settling into my bones like lead. "Helen managed Aunt Clara's estate. Emma couldn't have gotten that social security number without my mother handing it to her." "That is exactly what the prosecutor suspects," Patricia confirmed. "Which means Helen isn't just a victim of identity theft anymore. If they can prove she willfully provided a deceased relative's information to Emma to secure fraudulent funds, Helen is facing conspiracy to commit wire fraud. The police are going to start knocking on doors, Sarah. They are going to look for any hidden assets, and they might look at you." The coffee in my mug suddenly felt cold. "We need to get ahead of it," Patricia instructed. "As a senior financial analyst, your career requires a spotless background. I want every single email, text message, and voicemail you have ever received from Helen or Emma regarding money. We are going to build a firewall around you so thick that the fallout can't even touch your shadow." For the next 8 hours, I didn't work on my company's portfolios. I worked on dismantling my family's lies. I am a meticulous record keeper. It's my job. I pulled up emails from 7 years ago, back when Emma was first married to a soft-spoken, hard-working carpenter named David. My mother had despised David. She had constantly belittled him, manipulating the situation so thoroughly that when they divorced, David was practically forced to walk away from his own son, Leo, just to escape the psychological torment. As I sifted through the old emails, I found the smoking gun. An email exchange between Emma and Helen from exactly 4 years ago. The subject line was simply, "closing costs." Emma wrote, "Mom, the boutique needs another 20 grand or the landlord is locking the doors. David's credit is maxed and he's threatening to cut up the cards." Helen's reply was chilling in its casual cruelty. "Don't worry about David. The man is useless anyway. I still have the estate files from Clara's passing. The bank hasn't frozen her secondary accounts yet. I can co-sign a new application using her credentials. Just make sure the mailing address goes to the P.O. box." I stared at the screen, my stomach turning. I didn't just print the email. I exported the raw data file, ensuring the digital timestamps and IP addresses were perfectly preserved. I compiled a 400-page dossier of their financial toxicity, burned it onto a secure flash drive, and drove it directly to Patricia's office. "Bury them," I told her. Patricia looked at the drive, a predatory smile spreading across her face. "Consider it done. But Sarah, you should know, the court has scheduled an emergency custody hearing for Leo tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. Helen is filing for emergency kinship placement. I walked out to my car, the cold evening air biting at my cheeks. Leo didn't deserve to be a pawn in Helen's twisted game. I sat in the driver's seat, pulled out my phone, and dialed a number I hadn't called in 5 years. "Hello?" A deep, cautious voice answered. "David," I said quietly. "It's Sarah." There was a long, heavy pause on the other end of the line. I could hear the faint sound of a television playing in the background. "Sarah," David finally said, his tone thick with suspicion. "If Helen put you up to this to ask for bail money, you can go straight to hell." "I'm not calling for Emma, and I'm not calling for Helen," I said, my voice steady and resolute. "I haven't spoken to them since last night, when I called the police to their motel room. Emma is in jail, David. And tomorrow morning, Helen is going into family court to try and take permanent custody of Leo." I heard a sharp intake of breath. The television in the background was abruptly muted. "What did you just say?" "I'm calling because I know you want your son back," I continued, gripping the steering wheel. "I know my mother lied during the divorce proceedings. I know she funded Emma's lawyers to bleed you dry so you would surrender custody. Tomorrow, Helen is going to stand in front of a judge and play the victim. But I have a flash drive with 400 pages of digital evidence proving that Helen is a co-conspirator in federal wire fraud. I have the emails where they discuss ruining your credit." The silence stretched on for so long I thought the call had dropped. "Why are you doing this?" David asked, his voice cracking slightly. "You always stood quietly by while they tore me apart." "Because 3 weeks ago, Helen looked at my 9-year-old daughter and told her she wasn't family," I replied, the icy calm returning to my chest. And I realized I was done standing quietly. "Meet me at the diner on 4th Street in 20 minutes. Bring your lawyer." The next morning, the family courthouse was a zoo. The fluorescent lighting overhead cast a sickening yellow pallor over everything. I sat on one of the hard wooden benches in the hallway, wearing a sharp navy blue blazer, sipping a black coffee. At 8:45 a.m., Helen walked out of the elevator. She looked like a ghost of her former self. Her usually perfect blonde hair was unwashed and pulled into a messy clip. She was wearing a wrinkled blouse, and the dark circles under her eyes were visible from 20 feet away. She didn't have a high-priced lawyer with her. She had a tired-looking public defender she had likely met 10 minutes ago. She saw me sitting on the bench. Her eyes flared with a desperate, venomous hatred. She took 2 steps toward me, her finger pointing like a weapon. "You," she hissed, her voice vibrating with rage. "You did this. You threw your own sister in a cage. When the judge gives me Leo today, I am making sure you never see him again. You are dead to me, Sarah." I didn't blink. I didn't raise my voice. I just looked at her over the rim of my coffee cup. "You already said I wasn't family, Helen," I replied softly. "I'm just taking your word for it." Before she could scream again, the heavy oak doors to courtroom 4B swung open. David walked out, flanked by a very expensive, very aggressive-looking family law attorney. David looked different. He was wearing a tailored suit, his shoulders were pulled back, and for the first time in the 7 years I had known him, he didn't look afraid of my mother. Helen scoffed, crossing her arms. "What are you doing here, David? You gave up your rights. The judge isn't going to hand a child to a deadbeat." David didn't even look at her. He looked at me, gave a microscopic nod of gratitude, and then walked past Helen into the courtroom. When the hearing began, Helen immediately turned on the waterworks. She stood before the judge, weeping into a tissue, painting herself as a loving, devoted grandmother who had been blindsided by her daughter's mistakes. She begged the court to give her emergency custody, claiming she was the only stable environment Leo had ever known. The judge, a stern man with silver hair, looked over his glasses at David's attorney.
Counsel, does the father have a response to this emergency petition?
David's attorney stood up, unbuttoning his suit jacket. He didn't just have a response. He had the flash drive I had given them.
Your Honor,
The attorney said, his voice booming through the quiet courtroom.
not only do we vehemently oppose the grandmother's petition, but we are formally submitting Exhibit A into evidence. It is a comprehensive digital dossier proving that Helen Mitchell is currently under active investigation for federal wire fraud, identity theft, and the financial exploitation of a deceased relative.
Helen's face drained of all color. She gripped the edge of the defendant's table so hard her knuckles turned white.
That's a lie, she shrieked. I don't know what he's talking about.
The attorney smoothly handed a thick, printed binder to the bailiff, who passed it to the judge.
Turn to page 42, Your Honor.
The attorney continued relentlessly.
You will see an email directly from Helen Mitchell's IP address, explicitly instructing Emma Mitchell to use the Social Security number of her deceased sister to secure fraudulent funds. We argue that Helen Mitchell is not a stable environment. She is an active flight risk and a danger to this child's welfare. The judge read the page. The courtroom was so quiet you could hear the hum of the air conditioning. Slowly, the judge looked up, his eyes locking onto my mother with absolute disgust. Mrs. Mitchell, the judge said, his voice dangerously low. Is this your email address? My mother looked over her shoulder, her panicked eyes searching the gallery. She made eye contact with me sitting in the back row. I gave her a small, tight smile. The trap had finally snapped shut. My mother looked over her shoulder, her panicked eyes searching the gallery. She made eye contact with me sitting in the back row.
I gave her a small, tight smile. The trap had finally snapped shut. Your Honor, I don't know what that document is, Helen stammered, turning back to the judge. The theatrical tears were completely gone, replaced by the raw, unpolished sweat of genuine terror. My daughter, Sarah, the one sitting right there, she works with computers. She's a financial analyst. She fabricated this. She is trying to destroy me because of a petty family argument. The judge didn't even blink. He adjusted his glasses and looked down at the public defender standing next to my mother.
Counsel, I highly suggest you advise your client on the penalties of committing perjury in my courtroom.
The public defender, clearly realizing he was standing on the deck of a sinking ship, put a firm hand on Helen's arm and whispered harshly into her ear. Helen flinched, her mouth snapping shut, but she continued to glare at the judge with a mixture of disbelief and fury. The evidence presented in Exhibit A contains verified digital footprints, IP logs, and timestamps that align perfectly with the ongoing federal investigation, the judge stated, his voice echoing with absolute authority. This court will not place a 7-year-old child in the custody of an individual who is not only financially unstable, but is an active target in a federal wire fraud conspiracy. He picked up his gavel. The grandmother's petition for emergency kinship placement is denied with prejudice, the judge ruled. Furthermore, given the father's stable history and the fraudulent nature of the previous custody arrangements orchestrated by the maternal family, I am granting immediate, full emergency custody of the minor child, Leo Mitchell, to his biological father, David Thomas. The sharp crack of the gavel hitting the sound block was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. David let out a long, shuddering breath, burying his face in his hands. His lawyer clapped him on the shoulder. Helen, however, completely lost her mind. The veneer of the wealthy, put-together suburban matriarch shattered into a million pieces.
You can't do this,
she shrieked, lunging toward the plaintiff's table before the bailiff grabbed her by the arm.
He is my grandson. He belongs with me. You are stealing my family.
Ma'am, you need to step back and exit the courtroom or you will be held in contempt, the bailiff warned, his grip tightening. Helen was forcibly escorted down the center aisle. As she passed my row, she dug her heels into the carpet, fighting the bailiff's grip just to look at me. Her face was red, the veins in her neck bulging. "You did this, Sarah," she spat, her voice dropping to a vicious, venomous hiss. "You ruined your own blood. You are a monster." I didn't stand up. I didn't raise my voice. I simply leaned forward slightly, looking her directly in her wild, terrified eyes. "No, Helen," I whispered calmly. "I just picked up the broken pieces. You're the one who stomped on them." She was dragged out into the hallway, her screams fading behind the heavy oak doors. I sat in the quiet courtroom for a moment, letting the adrenaline slowly leave my bloodstream. David walked over to my row. His eyes were red, but for the first time in years, he looked completely awake. "Thank you," David said softly. "Don't thank me," I replied, picking up my purse. "Just take your boy home, David, and never let them near him again." The collapse of my mother's empire over the next 48 hours was absolute. Because the federal investigation had accelerated, the bank did not give Helen the standard grace period for her foreclosure. 2 days after the custody hearing, at exactly 8 a.m., the local sheriff's department arrived at her sprawling suburban home. They changed the locks. They placed a heavy steel chain across the front gate. Everything inside, the expensive Persian rugs, the crystal wine glasses, the custom furniture she had bought using stolen money, was seized to be liquidated for restitution. Helen was officially homeless. She tried to call me from 3 different burner phones over the next week. I didn't answer a single one. I simply forwarded the voicemails to a secure cloud drive, just in case Patricia needed them for the restraining order. In her final voicemail, she wasn't yelling. She was sobbing, a hollow, broken sound, begging for just $50 to buy groceries. I deleted the voicemail from my phone and went back to cooking dinner for my daughter. Time is a brilliant filter. It washes away the noise and leaves only the truth behind. It has been exactly 1 year since the Sunday afternoon my mother looked at my daughter and told her she wasn't family. The legal dust has finally settled. Emma pleaded guilty to 3 counts of felony wire fraud and identity theft. Because of the sheer amount of money she stole and her attempt to flee across state lines, she was sentenced to 4 years in a federal correctional facility. Helen avoided prison, but only by the skin of her teeth. She struck a plea deal, agreeing to testify against her own daughter to save herself. The golden child was finally sacrificed when the matriarch realized the fire was reaching her own feet. Helen is currently living in a tiny, subsidized studio apartment 2 towns over. Her wages from her new job as a cashier at a discount grocery store are aggressively garnished by the state to pay back the remaining debts. She has no car, no luxury handbags, and no family to manipulate. David retained full, permanent custody of Leo. I hear through mutual friends that the boy is doing much better. Without the constant, toxic coddling from Helen and Emma, he has actually turned into a decent, respectful kid. He plays Little League baseball now, and David never misses a game. As for me, I am sitting in my living room. The afternoon sun is streaming through the large bay windows, casting a warm, golden glow across the hardwood floor. Maya is 10 now. She is sitting on the rug, carefully snapping pieces of a massive, intricate Lego castle together. It is quiet. It is safe. I look at my daughter, watching her brow furrow in concentration as she places a tiny plastic flag on the highest tower of her castle. She doesn't flinch when she hears footsteps. She doesn't hide her toys when someone walks into the room. She knows with absolute certainty that she is loved, respected, and protected within these walls. People often think that revenge has to be loud. They think it requires screaming matches, dramatic confrontations, or meticulously planned sabotage. But they are wrong. The most devastating revenge you can ever inflict on a narcissist is to simply remove their access to you. It is to let them stand in the ashes of the bridges they burned, completely alone, while you walk away. I take a sip of my coffee, savoring the absolute, beautiful silence of a life free from my mother. I didn't just survive the fire she tried to set in my home. I used it to forge a steel door, and I locked her on the outside forever.